Flooding is one of the biggest risks we experience, and it's getting worse. In part, it's getting worse because the water cycles are changing. The atmosphere is warming up. We're getting more water in the air. We're getting more cloud bursts, which means we're getting precipitation events, which in a small period of time, the amount of water that gets dropped in a location is increasing significantly. And that's what's happening with regularity. Now our cities and our communities are not built for this. And if we do not dramatically change where and how we're living, then our lives are going to be massively disrupted by this. I'm Stuart Yasgur, and this is Economic Architecture, the podcast. In August, the Milwaukee area had a once in a 1,000-year storm. That's the kind of storm that is so unlikely that there's only a 0.1% chance of it happening in any given year.
And these are larger storms that our systems weren't designed to manage. The 2010 storm was really the wake-up call for me. That was the one where you might have seen pictures of a SUV in a sinkhole in the middle of the street. We had massive damage from this storm. FEMA came in 08, 09, and 2010. But that third year, when the really big storm hit, I knew that something was different and that we needed to change and really accelerate that change of what we were doing. We'd already started some of these seeds that we were doing, like green infrastructure, but I really saw that we needed to shift the entire district toward a more resilient approach.
This week, I had a fascinating conversation with Kevin Shafer.
My name's Kevin Shafer, Executive Director of Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Sewerage districts are really interesting. They're the folks who take wastewater out of locations, and they're also the folks who focus on preventing flooding. In the Milwaukee metropolitan area, it's a really interesting geography. They're on the Great Lakes. There are rivers and other bodies of water right near them. And really interestingly, they draw their drinking water from the Great Lakes, which is also the destination for the things that come out of the sewage system. So that means they have to take extra care in thinking about what leaves their sewer system. They also have other challenges. For example, in the Midwest, it's not uncommon for some houses in a city to experience sewer backups, which is what it sounds like. Instead of sewers taking waste away from a home, the waste backs up through the sewer system and enters people's homes. It's a horrible situation. As the person leading MMSD, Kevin looked at this and he said that it needs to stop. The climate's changing, the situation is getting worse and not better, and he realized that if we're going to make progress, we need a vision that rises to the magnitude of the problem. So Kevin came up with a 25-year vision. Over the last 15 years, he and his colleagues have led a massive transformation in Milwaukee and the surrounding areas. They're working with local communities, working with other branches of government, working with private sector, working with citizen sector to create this capacity.
So I worked for the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In 2002, I became Executive Director. With that new role in 2002, I started programs like green infrastructure and natural infrastructure. Started implementing those programs. Things were going along great. Early 2008, 2009, 2010, we had 3 years where we had greater than 25-year occurrence storms hit the Milwaukee area. So Milwaukee is on the western bank of Lake Michigan, so we're one of the Great Lakes cities. And the water that we use for drinking water comes from Lake Michigan. And then as we use that water and process it, we put it back into the environment. So we put it back into Lake Michigan, which is our drinking water supply. And it's really important to understand that because I think it gains more traction with the public to know that what we're treating as wastewater could become their drinking water very soon.
I have to tell you, we love the work that you're doing. And I think it's very powerful for people to hear about the long-term horizon that you're taking, the concrete steps you're taking. I just don't think people realize the extent to which there are people and offices like yours across the country who are really kind of leading the way to address these issues.
Well, everything that we do takes a while to build. So it's not something we just say, oh, we're going to do this and it's done next week. It takes time to plan it, design it, construct it. And I really do think the approach that we started back in 2000, 2002, where we are looking at the entire watershed, is the real way to go, because you have to look at all forms of water, whether it's stormwater, drinking water, flood water. You just have to manage them all as much as you can. Mother Nature will throw a few kinks at you every once in a while, but you just need to do what you can. The MMSD, Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, has 29 different municipalities, the city of Milwaukee being the largest of those. I have 1.1 million people that are part of our district, and we treat all the wastewater within that those political boundaries. And we also provide flood management services within those boundaries. So people take drinking water from Lake Michigan, they use that water, and then they flush it, or it comes from their showers or their dishwashers or their laundry. That used water comes through sewers back into the MMSD system, where it comes down to two water reclamation facilities, the Jones Island Water Reclamation Facility and the South Shore Facility. Those two treatment plants treat that wastewater to a standard higher than what EPA requires us to. And then we discharge that water back into Lake Michigan. So it's a natural cycle that occurs here. And some places, wastewater goes back into a creek and it flows back downstream to someone. Here, that water stays in Lake Michigan.
People may not realize it, but that really puts you at the frontier of dealing with, as you talk about flood management, it really kind of puts you at the frontier of dealing with resilience and being intentional about how you think about where water comes from, what people do to the water, and then where does it go? How do you remove it from the cities? And I think people may not recognize that this is part of the frontier of how we all have to think differently about living in cities and towns.
And I'm a civil engineer. So when I started this job, resilience was not in my vocabulary. I had no idea what that meant or how to work it and what to do. What I've learned over the last 25 plus years of this job is that every resource that we touch, we have the ability as individuals to do something. We can use less. We can try to not put as much stuff into it. So there's some waste streams that just happen, but there's a lot of others that we have control over. And something in the 2009, 2010 timeframe that I learned what resilience was, and I really saw climate change happening. And in late 2009, I wrote a vision for the year 2035. And that document, when I retire, that was the best thing I could have done. That document laid out where we needed to be by the year 2035 as a district, which meant for greater Milwaukee area. We didn't give the specifics of how, but what we wanted to do. So it said 0 homes in the 100-year floodplain, 0 combined sewer overflows, 0 separate sewer overflows. We want to have good effluent through our treatment plants into Lake Michigan. And we want to convert to renewable energy at our 2 wastewater plants. And wastewater treatment plants use a lot of energy. So that was and is a huge step for us.
That's remarkable. And I think it's not common for people to hear about 25-year planning horizon with that kind of clarity. You know what you want to do, but you don't even necessarily know how you're going to do it because the technology and everything else, the situation's changed so much. So we're now 15 years into that plan. How's the progress going so far?
Yeah, and back on the 25-year horizon, one of the reasons I did that is sometimes politics gets involved, but most political leaders think in 4-year chunks, their terms. So I tried to push it far enough out in the future where, it was easier for folks to get their arms around and understand. As far as how we're doing on the flood management work, I think we were down about a third of the homes or structures that we had in the floodplain from before. So we're still working on that. We've got projects in construction right now to try to deal with some of the larger issues that we have on the rivers. But we've reduced the number of homes in the 100-year floodplain by 2,500. So it's a huge number. Most of those structures are still where they were. We just shrunk the floodplain so that they're not in that 100-year damage zone anymore. On a normal day when it's not raining, the Jones Island facility will run entirely off of landfill gas. So that gas is converted into electricity and it runs the plant. And Jones Island is roughly a 9 to 10 megawatt facility.
Wow. Every community has places where you're like, okay, if we get a tremendous storm, that street is like, there are going to be puddles, it's going to flood, those homes are in danger of flooding. And, for a long time, we built very close to rivers and we built into floodplains. So we built right on the banks of rivers, right in the creeks, lakes. And so there are maps that now show, okay, if we get rain events, this is where we're likely to see flooding. And so if you live in that area, you're living in what's called the floodplain. You said there are 2,500 fewer homes in the 100-year floodplain than were. It doesn't mean that you've moved those buildings. You've actually moved the floodplain. I mean, that's a tremendous achievement.
Yeah, we're working with Milwaukee County Parks. We're building storage vessels, storage areas where we can store those large storms in the park area and not have it impact the residences and businesses downstream. It's a good deal for us because it helps us fulfill that mission and reduce damages. It's a good deal for the park system as well because 95% of the time, those parks are just natural parks that don't have water in them. and we improve the parks as part of our project. So we'll put in new playground equipment, any type of recreational amenities that they want, we'll add that as part of our project.
Kevin, can I play that back to you as you're describing it? So when you have really heavy storms, you need that water to go somewhere. One of the places that you're helping to create storage for that water is in parks. You're reducing the risk, and this is actually carrying out your mission. So that means you're able to bring resources to the table to improve those parks, create playgrounds there, fields, sports fields, and et cetera. 90% of those times, they're accessible to the community to actually go ahead and use it. And then when there's an enormous storm, they serve this other function, which is they become a huge storage capacity for this rainfall.
You got it. A lot of park districts in the country are really struggling with finances. So this is a great partnership between two local governments to really meet the mission of both.
So, for example, you have the sewerage district, and then you have the parks, and those are usually two siloed different parts of government. But one of the things to work together and say, okay, look, if we can create the capacity to store rainwater, that actually lowers costs on the sewage side. So maybe we can use the fact that it's benefiting the sewage side to help pay for the improvement of the park infrastructure for the communities. And so parks and playgrounds that are community infrastructure, but it also plays a critical role in the whole watershed and the management of the entire watershed. So that's remarkable.
Yeah. And as we're facing climate change and trying to be more resilient, we need to look at multiple benefits from parks, from any type of area that there's out there, or infrastructure, or wouldn't try to have as many benefits result from that investment as possible.
And how much capacity have you been able to create to store rainwater?
Well, in August of last year, we had a 1,000-year storm. And on the Menominee River, we built a facility called the County Grounds Flood Management Facility. It's a large open space area. If you went out there during normal time, it just looked like a natural vegetated area. But during that storm, we stored 160 million gallons in that one facility. Now we've got other facilities interspersed around the watersheds in the area. One of the things that came out of this huge climate-induced storm that we had in August is I'm going to ask them to tweak the vision that I wrote for 2035 and prioritize some of these storage vessels in the parks that we're talking about, because there was massive damage in August from this huge storm. And even though we built for the 100-year storm, this was the 1,000-year storm, we saw significantly less damage occur where we completed projects. We're calling to try to accelerate those flood management cells around the region, and also have it be more community-led, because the community is the recipient of the storm. They're the recipients of the benefits. And I think if we take the community-led approach, we can build in the resilience better, because they'll have different issues in different neighborhoods.
That's very exciting. 160 million gallons is, it's kind of a mind-boggling number that you just mentioned. It's hard to picture what that is. Like, this is an enormous amount of water. And the fact that the 1,000-year storm hits, obviously it overwhelms the infrastructure that's there. But everywhere where you start to build that resilience for the 1 in 100-year storm, you see the effect of the fact that the damage is much lower. Now you're looking and saying, okay, we have this plan in place to put more capacity. We can accelerate the pace of that and do it in a way that really engages communities so that they can direct it and shape it and kind of make sure that they understand both the risks that they're facing, but also the benefits that are going to come from building this infrastructure right in their local community.
Yeah. You could build the greatest piece of infrastructure in the world. It would do exactly what you wanted it to do. But if you don't have the public involved with that development, with that discussion, they won't understand what you're doing. They won't understand why you're doing it. And they'll always have a reason to say you didn't do something that they wanted. You need to engage the public from the very beginning.
Yeah, because everybody feels the risk, the fragility that they're experiencing. They see the possibility of storms, the idea that infrastructure isn't something that's happening to their community, but it's actually something that their community is involved with, helping to create, shape. How does that affect trust?
It builds trust and it builds ownership, because then they'll help maintain it. They'll help pick up litter if it needs. It's something that they'll take pride in more than if you just came in and said, here, it's all yours, take it from here. And we want them to be part of that discussion.
Right. Our water is affected by what happens in the cities, what happens in the towns, but also a huge user and contributor to water and how water are flowing are agricultural practices. And, outside of Milwaukee, there's huge agricultural areas. And how they plant, what they plant, and what they put on those fields affects the quality of the water and how much water comes off their property. So if you just have like the industrial farm with rows and rows of corn growing with lots and lots of chemicals and fertilizer to grow it, and then it rains heavily, like that water will just run off those fields. Lots of lakes and streams and estuaries that we all live next to are deeply polluted by the fertilizers that agricultural producers put on to grow our foods.
Oh yeah. So we take the entire watershed approach. So the Milwaukee region is on the downstream end of the Milwaukee River Basin. So probably 80% of the basin is agriculture, and it all flows off agricultural land down to the Milwaukee region into the urban setting. And one of the early on projects that actually my predecessor had started talking about it. Then when she left, I had the fun job of implementing it. It was called the Green Seams Program. And what Green Seams is it's a land purchasing program where we identify hydric soils, we identify wetlands that have been farmed or been covered up. And we go in and we purchase that land and we restore that natural hydrology for that area. And if we can store water upstream in a wetland, or if we can have that water infiltrate into the ground upstream, that's less water coming downstream into the urban setting. We also have a working soils program where we're working with the farming community. It's a great partnership with the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture. That one is one where we pay the farmers to use different farming practices to reduce runoff downstream and reduce pollutants downstream. So this could be cover crops. It could be changing when they till their lands based on rainfall and so forth. And then the other thing that we're doing upstream, and mostly in the rural setting, is we've got a partnership with Ducks Unlimited, where we're partnered with them to build 4,000 acres of wetland. I'm trying to remember the numbers. We want to reforest the upstream areas of the watershed and in the urban settings. And we also want to build wetlands upstream to try to reduce the runoff downstream. So you can't do what we're doing and say water stops at a city boundary. It's going to flow downhill. So what can we do throughout the watershed at the lowest cost to get the biggest bang for that investment? And it's working with farmers on the working soils program, and it's working with farmers for the Green Seams efforts where we're purchasing the land, and it's revegetating areas that need to have new forests and other areas and restoring wetlands.
It's incredible. Do you mind if we go through each of the just a little bit and unpack a little? So
I thought
just
I only
because
had 10 minutes left.
because first, it's not necessarily common to have that much agricultural upstream from a city in that way. You're so directly connected, and also it's the upstream from the drinking source for the city as well. People may not realize the extent to which the agricultural practices have an effect on how much water goes and what's in the water that's going downstream.
You need to have everyone understand that what's really uncommon is to have a constituency in their urban setting that's willing to pay for improvements outside of their community, that they understand it's a watershed. They understand the connection to the drinking water supply. I live in a wonderful place, and it's just one of those things where through constant education, letting people know water flows downhill. It may start on the farm. It may start on a parking lot, but that water makes it into the lake. And when it's in the lake, it becomes part of our drinking supply for us, for Chicago, for all the Great Lakes communities. So we need to treat it like the jewel it is and try to protect that from the moment that raindrop hits whatever land surface going downstream.
It sounds like part of what's enabling this is that you're helping people recognize that they need to look beyond just their political boundaries, but to see how they're intertwined, and that, and you're actually seeing agricultural change in practices based on.
We partnered with USDA, and there's a program that they had called Regional Conservation Partnership Program, and we received funding. And we've got, I want to say 1,700 acres. There might be more than that of land in the Working Soils program that's part of this RCPP. And really, the money comes to MMSD, but then we just funnel it out. So it just goes through us to the farmers to help educate them. And they are the greatest partners because we're coming to them with, number one, they're probably not plowing their fields as much, so they're saving money on some of their investment. I would try to always do something that improves their yields or keep their yields the same. And they're very respectful of the land because they've lived it their whole lives and worked it. So they've been a great partner. Now, the beginning years were a little tough, but as we just started talking to them, having big government come in sometimes is not something some communities like. But we didn't say we were going to buy your land or stop your business. We were there to try to just expand on what they were doing in a better way.
Right. And it's not always the easiest bridge to build between urban and rural communities, right?
Yeah.
Even though they're obviously interdependent in this really critical way.
Yeah, I mean, early on, and we still have some combined sewer overflows. We're just over 2 a year now. So we've done a great job with our tunnel and all the other work that we're doing to try to reduce those combined sewer overflows. But when we started to work with the rural community, I don't know, this is 2002, 2003, somewhere in there, I would go to these different farming groups to talk. And the thing that they would say at that time as well, our little bit of water is nothing compared to the X million gallons that you're overflowing. You should be taking care of your problem first. And they were right. We need to work on it together. And so we just got through those conversations and said, yeah, but what you do would help us downstream. What we do downstream could help you. So you really want to take it from that collaborative approach.
Yeah. And working with partners in new ways it kind of seems to be thematic of how you're operating. I know another surprise would be talking about an organization like Ducks Unlimited as part of the,
Oh, yeah.
you you help people understand a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yeah. So President Biden came in to term. I saw that we needed to try to reforest, and I thought there might be federal funding available to reforest the watershed. This has been one of those kind of bucket list things that I always wanted to do before I retired. So I called a friend of mine out in DC and I said, so I'm looking to try to reforest the Milwaukee River watershed. And he was close friends with some folks at Ducks Unlimited. He goes, oh, you got to talk to Ducks. DU is doing so much work here. And again, you're finding a partner that has a different goal or mission, but there's parts of those goals and missions that interweave with what we're doing. And they've been phenomenal. They're just a great partner. And we've been working with them now for 3-4 years. And they're reforesting. It's a slow start project because you have to grow the trees. You just don't buy 1,000 trees. So we're growing the trees. We're starting to see programs both in the rural, suburban, and urban setting where we're starting to get those trees out into the watershed. And the goal is, again, they won't stop flooding immediately, but as those trees grow, they'll reduce the water runoff and increase the interception of the rainfall as they grow. So the hope is on a long term that is kind of a buffer for the watershed. It won't be the total use, but a buffer toward these harder slopes. Partnerships build everything. And if it was just MMSD going out and say, hey, we're going to plant 10 trees here and it's all going to be good, that would go so far. But having others talk about it, some of the county agencies in the urban and rural settings talking about it, going through the issue now with the emerald ash, removing the tree canopy that we have, the timing is really good for it to just try to revegetate, reforest these areas.
2008, 2009, 2010, you lifted your kind of vision to the 25-year horizon. Like 2035 is not just a distant moment anymore. It's less than 10 years away. Where do you focus now? Is it still 2035 or are you starting to lift your view to the future beyond that?
Well, that's a question I struggled with personally. I'm hoping whoever takes over after me has the same approach. You dictate that. But I think as long as we build the strong watershed-based partnerships and move it forward, these initiatives will continue. And folks have asked me, well, what if you don't meet the goals that you laid out by the year 2035? And I'll say, well, that's okay. We're going to try everything we can to hit those goals. But if I got to 60% of those goals or 70% of those goals, they were pretty lofty goals that I set back in 2009, 2010. I'll retire happy if that's the case. When I started in 2002 as executive director, the train of thought at that point was that MMSD will just take care of this, big government will take care of it. We don't need to do anything from a personal standpoint. over this 23, 24 years, whatever it is, we've been able to change that approach. And so we really tried to drive the message down that MMSD can do what it wants, but we need the individuals to really contribute to that initiative. So it's things like putting a rain barrel on the bottom of your downspout at your house. We sell them for like $50, $60 each. We give away a lot as well. Instead of putting in a mowed grassed area that's part of the runoff from your property, maybe put in a rain garden or a bioswale that will infiltrate some of that water. There's simple improvements like that. Going with high efficiency appliances in your homes and businesses reduces the water. Picking up litter. I mean, if you don't pick up the litter, it'll get into the sewer system, and then we're either paying to renew a treatment plant or it gets into rivers, and then we're having to pay to renew it there. Just be mindful of where you are and how you impact the water environment, the air environment.
The magnitude difference between talking about 160 million gallons of capacity to store water versus putting a rain barrel in your yard. When you're choosing about appliances, maybe choose the one that's more high efficiency. The magnitude scale is so different. Does it really make a difference? If people are wondering, will those things really add up? What do you say to them?
Well, we've got something that we call every drop counts. So every drop of water counts, whether it's a drop of water that you're not using in your home, but preserving somehow, or it's water that is not running downstream. Really, every drop of water is. If you're a kid, you probably remember the video, the little drop of water going down through the watershed, and then it combines with every grams. You're just trying to take off the top of those storms, as much of that peak as you can. And then the rest of it you manage with these huge infrastructure projects. But we can't build ourselves out of this. And with the climate change that we're seeing and the resilience that we need to accomplish, we need to try to first be as efficient with what we have as we can, and then build some of these other things that will help. But you just have to have the entire community involved in it. We still have more work that we have to do there, but we're getting there, and we're seeing more people support it than not support it. Everyone's got a role to play in this. We all face the damages of a storm or a sewer overflow or rooted rivers. And if we can improve the entire water cycle, as I talked about before, the entire watershed, it helps the individuals, it helps businesses, it helps the economy. It's a win-win for everyone on that. And we've got partnerships with a variety of different private entities that we contract out for all of our design and construction work. So those are all jobs that we're creating there. There's a domino effect of these as we start building. There's more jobs, there's better places to live.
Kevin, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. When you see images of what happened in the 1,000-year storm, it is unbelievable. They had so much rain that even in places where they had enormous pipes that are big enough for you and I to walk through, the rainwater filled those pipes, and sometimes it just blew the covers off them. You had whole stations that were just underwater, and they looked like they were in the middle of a river. So that gives us some sense of the magnitude of the challenges they're facing. And as the climate is changing, it's getting worse. But I also want to give you a sense of how much they've accomplished. The climate's changing, we know that. The risk of flooding is getting worse. And if we don't take any action, more and more houses will be in danger of flooding. There will be more homes that are located in the floodplains. In the Milwaukee area, they've reduced the risk so effectively that 2,500 fewer buildings are in the floodplains now. That's not because they've moved the buildings. It's because they've actually decreased the risk of flooding. Their accomplishments are astounding. They've worked with the USDA. They've actually changed what agricultural practices are taking place upstream from their entire watershed, which is amazing. One of the things they've done is also work with community members, because this is about creating infrastructure that's used in the community. So they're now engaging with communities who get to inform what shape their infrastructure takes. For example, is this a park or a playground? Then the other kind of lightly surprising but positive thing to just echo is we talked about, like, what can people do? He's talking about storing 160 million gallons of water. He's trying to take what was a 20-year plan now and shrink it down to be a 10-year plan so that major infrastructure projects that were due to start in 2030 will be finished by 2030. So he's really accelerating the pace because we need to. We also talked about what can an everyday person do. And he also reinforced how critical it is to take everyday actions, right? To put a rain barrel in your property, to pick up litter on the street. Or if we leave litter on the streets, that becomes part of our water cycle. And if we don't stop it at the source, we're going to have to stop it somewhere else and take it out of our drinking water. There's a real mindfulness, a real ability to say, okay, what are these everyday steps we can take to reduce the amount of water that's being put into our watershed, to slow it down, to help remove the items that make this more damaging, more dirty for all of us. So I think thematically, these are the pioneers and innovators in plain sight that we're not seeing. I don't know whether this is going to be a useful analogy or not, but the fact that Kevin wears what could look a little bit like Clark Kent glasses is a little bit of the idea. These are the innovators, pioneers of resilience who are walking around in our midst, but under a little bit of disguise. Doesn't from the outside necessarily announce how compelling this is. When he stepped into this office, he saw the need for a bold long-term vision that really crosses through partnership to create massive new infrastructure to improve the resilience in these communities. And he's doing it across government agencies, community, city, state, federal levels. He's doing it with private sector folks. They're not just looking at kind of where is the problem, where's the flood today. They're looking at the entire watershed. It's going beyond and across political boundaries to recognize how we can really get people vested in working together to create a dramatically different future. I think it's an incredible conversation, and I think we have a real challenge to help shine a light on innovators who are not walking around with an S blazoned on their chest. I'm Stuart Yasgur, and this is Economic Architecture, the podcast.